Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you wanna get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.
VGW Group. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
You are listening to a Pleasure Podcast. For more from our Sex Podcast Collective, visit pleasurepodcasts.com.
Welcome back to Private Parts Unknown, a podcast about love and sexuality around the world. I'm Courtney Kocak, and today we are going to get Kernered, privates. What is that, you may ask? Well, that is the brilliant advice of Ian Kerner. He is a psychotherapist and a sex therapist. He's the author of a famous book called She Comes First. It's an oldie but a goodie, and the author of a newer book, So Tell Me About the Last Time You Had Sex. He also invented the term cliteracy, which I think is freaking brilliant. And Ian has so much amazing advice. I wanted to bring this interview back. It's actually from the archives. We first released this in 2021. So you are going to hear the voice of former co-host Sophia Alexandra adding some extra spice in this interview. But I wanted to bring it back because it was actually life-changing. I think it's hard sometimes in a long-term relationship to prioritize sex after a while. You know, you both get busy. There's a lot going on. Sometimes, as you're going to hear about in this interview, we have mismatched desires or our sex script gets wonky, whatever the case might be. This was a popular interview because it's so prevalent. So many couples have a hard time with their sex lives. But guess what? After talking to Ian, I really started thinking about what I could do to make my sex life the sex life of my dreams and my fantasies. And to do that with my current partner, my now fiance, soon to be husband. And what that meant for us was scheduling sex. So we have been scheduling sex every weekend. We have a plan. It doesn't have to be Saturday. It doesn't have to be Sunday, but it has to go down over the weekend. That's our date. And whether you're like totally in the mood or not, you just do it. And we found that it's like riding a bike. Even if you weren't in the mood, you just do it and you're like, oh my God, this is fun. We love it. And then it also creates more opportunities for spontaneity in between. So, you know, maybe we'll do it randomly on a Wednesday, whatever. And for us, that has been a game changer because before we just got into some bad habits, and sometimes it would be weeks and we would be like, oh my God, it's been 3 weeks and we haven't had sex, or it's even been a month. This is terrible. And I hated that. So I gotta say, scheduling sex doesn't sound sexy, but it is incredibly sexy. And that is just one of the many brilliant pieces of advice Ian shares with us in this interview. I cannot wait to share it with you. I hope it's a game changer for you too. So let's get into it. All right, you guys, we are so excited to have Ian Kerner, author of She Comes First, and now So Tell Me About the Last Time You Had Sex, on the podcast, because we're going to talk about one of my favorite things, which is cliteracy, which you're famous for.
I'm psyched. I would love to talk about cliteracy. It's actually probably my favorite topic in the world, and it has been so for at least the last 25 years. So let's talk.
Amazing. Just for anyone who hasn't read the book, because we're mostly going to talk about So Tell Me About the Last Time You Had Sex, but just for any dudes out there in our audience who need to become a little bit more cliterate, any quick tips that you can offer up?
You know, I would, keep in mind that the clitoris is the powerhouse of the female orgasm, that it responds to consistent stimulation, that there is what's known as the clitorovaginal distance between the glands of the clitoris and the vaginal entrance. So most sexual intercourse positions tend to inconsistently provide any clitoral stimulation. And so I'm a big fan of moving from an intercourse model of sex to an outer course model of sex, which I just believe is the best way to connect and have fun. And I'm all about dismantling the intercourse discourse, which almost dismantled me as a person. So now I want to dismantle it, you know? I don't know. Is that a good enough tip for the guys out there? I mean, I don't know.
Are you telling the guys to eat more pussy? Is that what you're doing?
If I'm understanding you correctly, it's to focus more on clitoral stimulation versus penetration, right?
Absolutely. And also, I mean, the clitoris, has both, external features and internal features.
Mm-hmm.
And the clitoris kind of looks like a wishbone, and the legs of the clitoris, the crura, wrap around the vaginal entrance. So even the first couple of inches inside the vagina can also create a lot of clitoral vibration and reverberation. That's probably one of the only reasons that intercourse can feel pleasurable, because once you get 2 or 3 inches inside the vagina, there are very few sensitive nerve endings. So it's really whatever direct stimulation or friction that you're creating against the clitoral structures, which are quite vast. I mean, all of the same tissue that gets used to create the external genitals, the penis of the guy, gets used to create the clitoris. So it's all the same material. It's just most of it is sort of internal.
Well, let's dig into your newest book. So tell me about the last time you had sex. This was a little triggery to me because I was like, it's not that often. And I maybe am in a sex rut. And so I'm excited to unpack that a little bit.
I also felt called out because I was like, fuck, I already know what I'm doing wrong. I don't want to look myself in the face about this.
Like She Comes First is like such an inviting, warm title. So is this book is the title just kind of like off-putting, like, fuck you, Kerner, for asking me this question, like I'm not going anywhere near this book?
No, it's honesty. It's honesty. And I think sometimes it's hard for us to have honesty about our own sexual laziness or habits, where it's like, well, we're just going to do the one position that, we always do, or like you initiate, and then you just get really lazy. And I think that's kind of what I did not want to confront.
Sophie and I too have also commiserated about this, but where we're like, fuck, we respond as sexperts for these articles sometimes. And like, we have a sex podcast. And so then when your sex life isn't checking all the boxes, then you're like, I'm a fraud.
No, you're the last thing from being a fraud. The whole second part of the book is really about embracing your constraints sexually, whatever they are, like my whole career. And most people that get into like sex therapy, like my whole career was based on just trying to understand myself at first and trying to sort of normalize my own experience, sexually. So I always say embrace the constraint, whether that means like use this as a call to action to figure out how to start having, more sex or having better sex with yourself in some way. But I would say like embrace the constraints.
Okay, so we'll unpack our relationship issues a little bit more after we discuss the book.
Okay.
So when we got the interview information, it said you're the Sherlock Holmes of the bedroom. So What mysteries are you trying to solve, Sherlock?
Oh boy, I see that's some copy that maybe shouldn't have made it into the marketing copy. But I have to say, I wrote it, so I'm responsible. You know what I was trying to get across, which is that whenever individuals or couples come in, they often know what they're experiencing. Like a lot of guys come in with erectile unpredictability, a lot of young guys, but they actually are not sure why. And couples come in stuck in sex ruts, and they actually like sex, but they're not having sex. So they know the what, but they don't know the why. And so being a sex therapist and doing this for 20 years, what I love about the work is that sexuality is so beautifully complex. And there are so many different variables that are intersect at once, like biological, psychological, cultural, relational. So in that way, it is kind of like being a detective in terms of like you're trying to kind of help these people understand the why. And if you can unpack the why, then you can help them figure out what to do. And so then that sort of connects into the title of the book, because once I've learned about an individual or a couple's issues, in every first session, I will always ask, so tell me about the last time you had sex. And I do that because, when I was starting out as a sex therapist, I was trained, hear the problem and then take a sexual history, right? And so suddenly I'd hear about a couple's issues in the room that they're experiencing today. And I was trained to start asking them about the first time they masturbated, and people were sort of like, what is this? We need help. It's like going to the dentist. We're in pain. Get us out of pain. So I discovered after a while that by asking someone to tell me about the last time they had sex, about hearing about, sex in action, that really a sexual event tells a story, and that there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. There's a sequence of interactions that are physical, they're emotional, they're psychological. And underneath a sexual event then is what I sort of call the sex script. Most couples, tend to fall into sex scripts, or people that are having sex, tend to fall into kind of a way of having sex. And if it works, fantastic. I usually am not going to see that person. But very often the sex script is reinforcing the issue or the problem, even if it comes down to a desire issue and not having desire. It's very often the way desire is initiated, which is the first part of the sex script, that's kind of reinforcing that. So if I can unpack what a couple or an individual sex script currently looks like, and they do evolve and change, then I can help kind of rewrite it away from that pain and sort of towards the pleasure, So it's just kind of, it's like a way in. And I work with so many different types of patients, across the life cycle, from 17 years old to 75 years old, married, polyamorous, non-monogamous, heterosexual, LGBTQ, trans. And it's like, I love having a methodology that's sort of like universal, but it allows me to get very specific.
When I was reading the book and preparing for this interview, I started to realize, I was like, oh, well, when I was single, I would like get ready for these dates, right? That was like a whole part of like the foreplay for me, essentially, was like me getting ready and like me getting into this sexy mindset. And we live together. He sees me in my sweatpants all the time. Like my hair's all jacked up. Like I don't always feel that sexy. And so for my part of it, I'm like, oh, I feel like that is maybe a sex script issue for me or something now. Am I using the word sex script right?
Yeah. I mean, listen, when I'm thinking, no. No, you totally are. Look, when I'm working with a couple and I say, so tell me about the last time you had sex, I don't say, okay, tell me about your sex script and let's get into it. No, I say, so how did things get started? Who initiated? Where did it happen? When did it happen? Was it sexy? Was it like a hot start, like you couldn't keep your hands off each other? Was it kind of just a warm start, like we're sitting there watching some Netflix and it just kind of, we moved towards each other? It was like a cold start, like, shit, we haven't had sex in a month. Like, let's kind of do this thing even though we don't really want to, or the sex therapist gave us the homework to go ahead and do this, So how did things get going? Then this is where my last book, She Comes First, comes in, sort of like, how did you start to build arousal? And how did you start to get warm and get connected? And how did things escalate? And to what extent were you engaging in just physical stimulation? Because so many sex scripts are just sequences of physical behaviors. But what about mind-based arousal? What about all the psychological arousal and creativity that you can sort of infuse into a sex script? And then, as arousal intensified, what were you doing? Was it outer course based? Was it intercourse based? Were you in sync? Is somebody getting left behind? Who had orgasms? Who didn't? In what sequence? What was sex like afterwards? Did you just reach for your iPhone and get out of bed, or did you connect with each other? And then, Courtney, what's interesting is then there's the erotic thread, which is like, where is eroticism in your life that leads you back to the next sexual event? And what I'm hearing you say, which is so cool, that part of it was just your relationship with yourself and feeling sexy and erotic. So that is part of the erotic thread. So when you ask me, is there a problem with your sex script? I would say, yeah, maybe like with this erotic thread, you used to have it, you would make yourself feel sexy, you said, or dress up or whatever. And now it's like COVID and we're all just not changing out of our pajamas. Like, so yeah, so maybe that would be a part of the sex script that we could look to rewrite or adjust a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of like the same thing where the laziness comes in, where like you would before for a date put in so much more effort than you do now. And the erotic thread is like, yes, to keep the fire going, it's like you should sext each other throughout the day when like each of you is working if you don't see each other that much. But once you've been together for a while, you're like, you're like, I'm busy. You do your own bullshit. I'll see you later. And then by the time the person gets home, you're starting from nothing, where you're like having to go through like, hey, how was your day? Blah, 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 before any other start can happen. So I feel like, yeah, the erotic thread is like part of it is keeping it between each other.
Totally.
And then the other part, keeping it between yourself. Like for me, I like to take a bath before having sex because that's my way to connect. And I'm like, I'm going to feel really nice and clean. I'm like, already a little bit aroused from just being naked with myself in the bath. I can like style myself, feel really good, put on perfume. So it's the same thing of like, Courtney, you getting ready for a date. It's like treating it a little more seriously than just like, let's bang it out.
We got to do it. It's seriously been way too long. Just lay down.
What's so interesting about what you're saying, Sophia and Courtney, is you're talking about this erotic thread and you're sort of talking about building up some sexual energy in yourself prior to sex. And you said so that we don't just come home and it's like we have to start. But what if you're actually paired with someone who's in a different desire framework and he or she can get started like that, right? They can just see you and you look sexy to them, even though you don't feel in the least bit sexy. You didn't dress up, you're still in sweats, you didn't take your bath, and like they're totally turned on and ready to go. Already there's a discrepancy in sort of the sex script and how you're cultivating desire.
Totally.
For sure. And I feel like I don't want to like men, women, put everybody in little boxes necessarily, but I do think it's like, yeah, my boyfriend's ready to go at the beginning when we have sex, no matter what.
Right. So then how do you get it? Like, how do you get going? Do you just have to like have the willingness and put yourself through the motions? What do you do then to sort of get synced up, right? He has what I call highly reactive desire, or it's also called spontaneous desire. He can take a sexual cue, like he sees you, you look sexy. He gobbles up that sexual cue with his eyes. It goes straight to his penis and he's ready to have sex, right? That's what sort of gets depicted in the media very often. And you're sort of saying that's your boyfriend, but it's sort of like you're saying it's not you, right?
It's not me at this point in my life, because maybe like the feedback loop has been disrupted or you know what I mean? And like, I'm not blaming it on, like a huge part of it is me too. It's like, we've been in this little small world of just each other. And then there's also like, I'm a workaholic and I'm obsessed with my career. So like switching out of that sometimes is like a whole thing, which I know Sophia can relate to too, because we're the same.
Yeah, but I also was going to ask, what's it called? So you're saying spontaneous and reactive is what you called how Courtney's boyfriend is. What do you call it when, like, for me, I feel like my sexual identity alone is different than my sexual identity in a couple. And like, for me, getting turned on is like, if my husband did jump me in that way, that would make me horny if I wasn't horny before. But because it doesn't happen, then mine doesn't happen. But
I gotcha. I totally get it. This is the most common discrepancy in desire frameworks, especially between men and women. Courtney, you said something interesting though. You said like oh, well, it's my fault too. Maybe it's me, like I'm working hard. And I think when people don't have that highly reactive or spontaneous desire, they start to wonder, oh, is something wrong with me? They internalize it a little bit. And what I would say is, hey, let's hold on for a second. And now let me answer Sophia's question. Like maybe you're just in a different desire framework, and maybe you're capable of feeling desire just as strongly, but how you get there is a little different. You don't gobble up a single sexual cue. Well, maybe what you need is a little more of a cascade of cues. You need more arousal to just simmer or percolate, or you need to have the right ratio between turn-offs and turn-ons. I don't know what your life is like at home, Sophia. If it's my life at home, there's way more turn-offs than turn-ons. From like my kids to dishes in the sink to just feeling like crap sometimes when I walk through the door. So some people have what we would call clinically responsive desire. It's that desire doesn't just happen. It doesn't just manifest from a single sexual cue. It actually responds to something that comes before it, which is that experience of arousal. So when your husband jumps you, you must find that arousing, Sophia. I mean, even if it happens quickly, you're still in a responsive place. You know what I mean? And if he doesn't do that, then your desire, you're saying, sort of doesn't come online.
Yeah. And like when I am, alone or out in the world or whatever, I absolutely will immediately just like see a person and be like, yep, would totally horny for you. If I'm on my own. But like at my house with my man that I've been with for 15 years, what's hot to me is if he's like, fuck, you're hot. Like the way that a stranger would react.
Right.
Yes.
But since he sees my old ass all the time, he doesn't have that like, oh my God. So then I'm not like, oh my God, And that becomes the feedback loop, I think, that Courtney had mentioned.
Yeah, that happens a lot in long-term relationships where you two aren't giving off as many sexual cues. And so your relationship is more about like all the other parts of the relationship and probably being kind of egalitarian and collaborative and communicating. But when it comes to sex, we want eroticism. We actually want a healthy kind of objectification. We want to feel desired and we want to be selfish about our sexual hunger. And that's a different kind of language that you have to, that's the erotic thread. Right? It's not just a sext. It's about being able to hop into that space where we are sexy, our sexual selves.
One of the things that we learned on our trip to Finland, because they're so feminist over there, right? And the bitches are crushing it. They're kind of running things. And so there's like this weird, it's almost like because everything is so fair, the guys don't know when to be aggressive or whatever. And so then the women are just not turned on and they don't want to be with those guys. And sometimes I can sort of relate to that in my smaller way here, where it's like, sometimes I want him to talk to me like,
if we're bosses in our daily life, like we want to be bossed when it comes to sexual life.
I'm with you. And you know what? I want to be the boss too, or I want to be bossed. Exactly. Yeah. It's really confusing. I'm working with a lot of younger guys and they're like mid-20s and 30s because they're so confused because on the one hand, they're so nervous about initiating and feel so much pressure around initiating. And then there's another part where they feel like they're sort of expected to sort of be walking erections sometimes or be able to get erections so quickly and have sex. So I'm actually it's the biggest part of my practice right now is what I call psychological erectile unpredictability amongst men who are just like, they're in this kind of double bind, which is like, come closer, stay away. Or can I come this close? No, come this close, right? It's just, there's a lot of confusing messages right now, but I agree what we all want in the end when it comes to sex is to be desired, and that is not the language of, oh, can you go pick up some milk at Whole Foods or, like who's taking the dog out tonight? That's the language of like, I want to do you.
Hey, privates, the ones with penises, I'm talking to you, okay? If you get in your head when it comes to having sex and your penis doesn't act the way you want it to, I have a solution for you. A penis pump, specifically from Bathmate. Penis pumps might sound funny, but they're actually an incredible tool to help you attain harder erections when you want them, and more intense orgasms. They can even help you last longer. And who makes the best penis pump? Well, Bathmate is the world's best-selling penis pump for a reason. With over 1 million satisfied men and even more satisfied partners, Bathmate harnesses the power of water through a hydraulic vacuum, acting as a secondary pump to your heart to draw blood safely into the penis. These are more effective and comfortable than typical air pumps. It's like a workout for your cock, okay? Bathmate helps to flush toxins and maintain tissue health, providing a safe, effective way to exercise an area neglected in the gym. While the user will feel an immediate benefit after using Bathmate, the greatest benefit is typically felt 2 weeks after regular use. And the best part is, there's a 100% money-back guarantee. Bathmate is so confident in the benefits of the product, they offer a 60-day, 100% money-back guarantee starting from the day that the product lands on your doorstep. So try it out, and if you're not satisfied, they'll send you a full refund. So how do you use this thing? Well, Bathmate is the world's only FDA-regulated hydro pump. Used in water, the hydro pump lends itself to use as part of your daily wash routine. In the privacy of a bath or shower, simply fill the Bathmate with warm water, slide your penis in, and compress the gator against the pelvis, inducing a vacuum. Or you can use the handball attachment provided with the Hydro Extreme. You leave the Bathmate on for about 3 minutes and then release the valve. Recommended use is between 3 to 5 times per week. While Bathmate can be used like a conventional pump for sexual spontaneity, depending on the user's needs, the main intention of Bathmate is as a private training aid, lending itself to discretion. This device is not a sex toy and does not directly stimulate pleasure. And right now, Bathmate is offering our listeners 10% off their first order when you go to bathmatedirect.com/private parts. That's Bathmate, BATHMATE direct.com/private parts to get 10% off your first order. That is bathmatedirect.com/private parts, and the link is in our episode description for super handy use. Get that penis pumping, privates. Hey privates, let's talk about pleasures and discoveries. So you know what a bummer is? That many women shame themselves because they can't finish from simple penetrative sex in a missionary position, but it's like, duh. Most of us need either romantic foreplay or a kinky setup. Some of us need both or even more. And I think Ian Kerner would definitely agree with this. So how do you tell a person you just met on a dating app that you should try stuff for you to have a proper culmination? How do you find the it thing that does it for you? How do you even start to talk about all this? Well, guess what? I have a hot tip for you. Fleur is a sex-positive dating app with a welcoming community of like-minded people. No judgment, no shaming. You're just free to be you and explore. A safe mode for women lets you choose when and with whom you want to do it. And while it's on, there will be no dick pics, no harassing pickup lines, nothing cheesy or abusive. Whether you're into one-night stands, friends with benefits, you want some sexting, no strings attached encounters, or you even want a long-term relationship, there are no forbidden desires on Fleur, only mandatory respect and consent. But most importantly, it's about the pleasure of intimacy. Dive into a world of pleasure with the Fleur app. There is so much inspiring exploration and embracing desires. This platform is your gateway to shared bliss with open-minded partners. So check out Fleur, the dating app, made for pleasure. Go to fleur.com. Again, check out Fleur, the dating app, at fleur.com.
What are some easy ways to kind of like bust out of those long-term relationship sex ruts and just start to communicate, I guess, your needs to your partner and vice versa?
Sure. So there's two concepts, which, they're kind of simple. I'll often give my patients some kind of sex homework. And if you read my book, you'll be able to identify what part of the sex script you probably need to do some work on. And so I'll give couples assignments like, I want you to create what's called a willingness window. It's a window of time that you're allocating to dedicate to some kind of activity like developing mind-based arousal or watching something sexy. And the willingness comes in because I know when it comes time to do it, you're probably not going to have the desire to do it. You're not going to feel sexual wanting. But if it's important, you can have the willingness. And if you have even an increment of willingness, that starts to be the seed to generate the arousal that can lead to desire and can lead to sex. So the first thing I would say is identify an area that you want to focus on, maybe decouple it from like having sex, like say, this isn't just about us having sex, because more than likely the way you're having sex might be reinforcing something about the sex script that's not working. This is about something else. It's about focusing on a specific thing that we need to focus on. Let's have the willingness to put it down on the schedule, which I know doesn't sound spontaneous, but you know what? Nothing's spontaneous at a certain point in life, right? Things get planned. So that's one piece of it. You ask the second piece. So when you have willingness, how do you start to talk about these things, right? Couples come in and they're always talking about their problems. No foreplay, no desire, no erections, no lubrication, no pleasure, whatever it is. And I'll always ask them, I'll say, so if we're going to work together for just a few months and we're going to meet every couple of weeks, every few weeks, and I'm going to give you some homework in between, and things are going to improve and get better, what does better look like? And they'll start to talk and I'll say, no, like, what does better look like? Like if I'm a fly on the wall, what am I seeing? If I'm like a dog at the foot of the bed, what am I hearing? If I'm the mattress underneath your bodies, like what am I feeling? And then they start to describe what they want. And it's not just the solution, it's kind of a fantasy. And then they're going to leave my office and they're going to be charged up and they're going to go have sex.
You tricked them.
Gotcha. You've been Kernered.
You also talk in the book about exploring your inner kinks a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to talk a little bit about how to do that within your relationship. And like, what if you find some desires changing and those are things that maybe you didn't negotiate, weren't part of your early sex life?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, it's interesting when I work with heterosexual couples, 100% of them engaged in intercourse the last time they had sex. I mean, if I asked both of you the last time you had sex, whenever it was, did it involve intercourse? Mm-hmm. Probably the answer is yes. Now, I don't know if this is the case for you because, patients come into my office, they have problems. But for a lot of heterosexual couples, they get to intercourse within about 1 to 5 or 6 minutes. There's not much that happens, before intercourse. So we're looking at like a very thin set of activities. And one thing that was interesting is that when gay men were surveyed about the last time they had sex, 65% of them didn't have intercourse. They engaged in outer course behaviors, 12 different behaviors that were put together in 1,300 different combinations. So that's 1,300 different sex scripts. So right there, I want to say the first thing to answering that question is start to deconstruct your sex script and put it back together in ways that are interesting. And then really the answer to your question is, but don't just make that sex script a series of behaviors. Start to bring some erotic energy. Like if I had met you when you were 4 or 5 in the playground, we'd all be playing some kind of make-believe something. Like we'd be inhabiting roles and there'd probably be more power play happening in that playground than is happening in a lot of people's bedrooms, but we really lose that capacity to do that. We lose that language. So I work with couples to start, I don't believe you start from the outside in. It's not about buying handcuffs or, saying spank me or choke me or whatever it is you're into, because that's working from the inside out and going back to your fantasies. And some people will say they don't have fantasies. I don't really call them fantasies. I call them core erotic themes, which isn't my language. It comes from a book by Jack Marin called The Erotic Mind. But these are themes that have sort of been with us often, and they grow, they change, they go out of vogue, they come back for us. But, there are erotic themes that circulate within us. And I try and help couples to connect to those themes. Sometimes a guy will say, I don't have any fantasies. Well, what's the porn you watch? Well, I love POV blowjobs, right? So, okay, so you love POV blowjobs. Well, why? Like, is it just the friction against the head of the penis and a penis in a mouth and pressure against the chest? No, it's that feeling of power, or it's the feeling of being dominated, or or it's the feeling of somebody totally taking care of me or something like that. So there is actually a core erotic theme already in the behavior and the porn that you're watching. So I do try and put in the book, like, I'm hoping questions that you could ask that might point to some of this stuff and start to open some of it up.
With the Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
This is your captain speaking. We've got clear runway and the weather's fine, but we're just going to circle up here a while and get lucky. No, nothing like that. It's just these cash prizes add up quick. So I suggest you sit back, keep your tray table upright, and start getting lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
A lot of the questions that we get DMs about are people who are asking how to, at least in my experience, it's been women asking how to open up their relationship with their partners, because generally the male partner finds it really threatening and like a rejection. And a lot of times the women that I get these DMs from have been in relationships with this guy for years. I've gotten one that was 7 years in, one that's 11 years in, and they've been wanting this for a long time, and they're just afraid to bring it up because whatever conversations they've had that just gently touched it were so painful for the partner that they stepped off. What do you recommend in these kind of situations?
And so in my experience, I've been doing a lot of work lately with sort of consensual non-monogamy and opening up relationships. And it can be usually initiated by either partner, right? Generally, it's not initiated by both partners, because, and this is really interesting. I think this is, I said, like, I'm dealing with a lot of like psychological erectile unpredictability. I wasn't 10 years ago. And people always ask what's changing. And what I am seeing now, which I think is a fascinating cultural moment, is couples who started out monogamously oriented, bought into that whole discourse and structure and want it, and are reaching a point where they have a really good relationship in a lot of ways, but their sexual selves just aren't really out there and happening. And so they want to open up the relationship. And it's such an interesting challenge to start off like monogamously oriented and really buying into that construct, and then to try and do this. And, honestly, I do recommend going to a therapist for that, or reading a really good book like Tristan Taormino's book on opening up. And there are a few, and then there were 3, I believe, is another one. But sometimes when I'm sitting with a couple, it doesn't come up, but I know that one partner is thinking about it, or it will come up overtly and one partner is not interested in it. But yet I'm sitting with a couple. So I'll sort of say, like, well, I almost become like a game show host, like door number 1, door number 2, or door number 3. I'm like, here's door number 1. Door number 1 is what you've already been doing, which is trying to work from the inside out. How can you two create a sexual world between yourselves? What have you done? What have you not done? What homework can I give you that you won't do because it's just not going to rock your world and get you going. And by the way, door number one can involve sex toys. It can involve watching porn together. It can involve role playing. It can involve tantric sex, BDSM. There's a lot you can do just between two people to create a world. But if that's not working, I'll sort of say, hey, lucky for us, we live in such interesting times where there's lots of sexual adventure to be had out in the world as a couple, actually. Mm-hmm. There are things that you can do. There's almost anywhere you go that's at least kind of urban. There are interesting parties going on. There are interesting events. There's ways of swinging or being part of, a different kind of sexual lifestyle. There's actually a lot there that can happen. So why don't you think about some shared sexual adventure? And some couples will really go out and do that. And you know what? They'll go to a sex party or they'll invite somebody home to have fun with. And that gives them a charge that keeps them going for a month or two, right? It just introduces that eroticism and they can really run on that for a while before they do it again. But most couples they're oh, we're not into that. And I love to challenge that. Well, why are you not into that? Why are you so sure that you're into consensual non-monogamy or opening up your relationship? Why are you so sure that you're not into shared sexual adventure? So I'm always trying to challenge and deconstruct. But then door number 3 is going to be sort of opening up and each of you figuring out what you both need. And it's tricky because you want as few rules as possible. Right? Sometimes when couples come in, they'll say, we want to talk about opening up our relationship. Can you read an email exchange between us where we talked about some of the rules just so you're
Awkward.
Prepared for us? and I swear I'll print it. And it's I don't have enough paper in my apartment to print this one email thread. It's I'm not a contract lawyer, So you want as few rules as possible. And that's when I sort of know it's going to work, because then there's a lot of inherent trust and goodwill. But even down to the details, where are we going to do this? Are we putting up profiles? Unfortunately, with heterosexual couples that sort of open up and go non-monogamous, it's a lot easier right now, I've found, for women to sort of create interesting sexual opportunities for themselves than it seems to be for the guys. The guys kind of struggle to get sort of seen in this way a little more. Anyway, does that start to, open it up a little bit?
I think that's a great start. And we love Tristan. That's a great recommendation.
I love Tristan too.
So we've been talking a lot about heterosexual and, cis people so far in relationships. And you say that your practice involves a lot of people on the gender spectrum and a lot of people on different sexualities. Are you finding that the problems that you're seeing in heterosexual couples are different from the problems you're seeing in other couples?
In a way, the problems are not so different. Everyone can struggle with desire. Everyone, regardless of your body, can struggle with some aspect of sexual function. Everyone can struggle with surrendering or letting go to pleasure. Everyone can deal with trauma. What I have found with, non-cis patients, with genderqueer patients, with gay men, with trans patients, with lesbian patients, is there isn't really a dominant narrative that overshadows them about how sex should look. So already there's a lot more creativity around the sex script because they don't have to buy into that dominant narrative. Also, because there isn't a dominant narrative, most of the people I've worked with have had some struggle to express their sexuality. If you're trans, if you're gay, you have to have a kind of grit to kind of go after the sex you want because it's not so easy. So there's kind of sexual grit, resilience, and creativity are already a little more in the mix than it is for heterosexual couples who can be much more sort of pessimistic and fatalistic about these things. So I find the problems are similar, but there's so much more sexual resilience and creativity within the LGBTQ patients.
That's fascinating that you say too about, well, just for myself, the door number 2 option. because it's like, I'm not really ready to open up my relationship. But at the beginning of the episode, we were talking about all these ways that like stranger sex is kind of like such a turn on to me. And like, I like the habits that come along with that. And so I do think that that door number 2 version of like exploring sex parties together or like finding that stimulation together is definitely a good entry point instead of just being like, let's open up and see what happens.
We kind of have this thing of like, we met, we were hot and heavy for each other. There was all this attraction. Now that's gone. So the only way I can feel that again is to find that again, you know, in some ways, or non-monogamy or cheating. But there is a whole in-between space of trying to expand your sexual worlds together. And I really would encourage door number 2, you know, because if you started out monogamously oriented and you're looking to expand your sex lives and you had that attraction to each other, and now just the sexual cues aren't as hot. I mean, it's different when 2 people never had chemistry or sexual attraction, but picked each other for different reasons. I would say if you had it, I have nothing against door number 3, but don't just neglect door number 2. Give it a whirl. There's some really interesting stuff happening.
Yeah, we went to Tokyo. Sophie and I got happy ending massages. And we found that that situation just made us like really appreciative of our partners. And then we were like skipping around the next day and we were so excited to go home and have sex with them, which totally opened my eyes to how that can kind of work for you psychologically.
Yeah. And did your partners want to know about it? Like, were they was that?
Oh, they had to hear it a bunch of times, whether they wanted to hear it or not.
Oh, okay.
It was in Business Insider, Ian. They had to get used to the idea.
But did it turn them on the first time? Like, did they have an erotic curiosity? If they're not podcasters who are going to go, you know, and get profiled, like, did your partners have any erotic curiosity about what was that massage like?
No.
I would say my boyfriend definitely was like, or just like, oh yeah, there's all kinds of different stuff that we could do. You know, just the like possibility was a turn on.
I don't think that my husband was like, ooh, that's hot. A man you hired making you come. I mean, I think that is a turn on for some people, but he was never like, ooh, that'd be hot if someone else made you come. He was like, all right, I'm glad you came. Good for you. He wasn't upset, but he wasn't like, this made me feel great. He was like, I wasn't there. This is fine.
You know, it's so interesting. In the book, I talk a lot about how, you know, you want to get really turned on, and we're talking a lot about getting turned on, but a big part of sex is also kind of turning off and going into like a kind of a flow state and just being really present and not thinking and just being and deactivating. So I'm just wondering, when you were getting those happy ending massages, maybe because you had the whole cognitive structure of this is a massage, this is what it's supposed to be, where you didn't have any issues kind of just deactivating and letting go and just...
I think we were kind of forced to, because like we didn't even speak the same language as the guys. And so there was like this sort of thing where it's like, we're just 2 people that are trying to like understand each other, and you know what I mean, which added this
I don't know.
whole...
For me, it was the same kind of relaxed flow state you get when it's a regular massage. So it happened like, almost immediately, you know?
Sophia got a way better massage than I did. Situationally, I was very turned on.
So Sophia, you know, like in your case with your husband, I asked that question, was it a turn on? And there's definitely a line between something that was lived out in the world and something that just exists within the realm of fantasy. I wonder, like, if that could have been like expressed, if you weren't actually having that experience, if it could still be expressed as a fantasy, or if it could be role played in some way with your partner. I'm wondering in a different context if it might have been a turn on.
That's a good idea. I'm going to see if we can role play it. That's a really good idea.
So let me know.
Well,
you owe me a massage, buddy.
I'm like, I've been talking to Ian. He told me that you owe me this. So.
This has been amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. You're great. I loved watching the Finland episode on YouTube. It was so amazing. And I hope you get back on the road soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ian.
Take care.
Oh my gosh, privates, wasn't that amazing? I think we all needed to hear that. We totally got Kernered and it was amazing. So thank you again to Ian. Definitely pick up his book. So tell me about the last time you had sex. And thank you for tuning into this episode of Private Parts Unknown. Stay tuned right here because I have got another sexy episode coming your way next week. For the latest episodes, look down and make sure you're following us on your favorite podcast player now. On most platforms, it's like a follow or a subscribe button. On Spotify, you also can hit the bell button and then you get notified about all the latest episodes. And to stay in touch between episodes, follow me at Courtney Kocak. That is Kocak on Instagram and Twitter. And I'm on TikTok now too. Whoa. Follow the show at Private Parts Unknown on Instagram and at Private Parts on Twitter. And privates, I am shamelessly trying to hit the top 1% on OnlyFans always and forever. So if you are interested in a Playboy style peek behind the podcast, you can subscribe to my OnlyFans account. It is just onlyfans.com/CocoPeepShow. Again, that is onlyfans.com/CocoPeepShow. And it is a very horny way to help support the show. So again, if you're interested, it's onlyfans.com/CocoPeepShow. Of course, subscribe to our newsletter at privatepartsunknown.substack.com. There is a link in the episode description for that. And subscribe to the Private Parts Unknown YouTube channel for a video version of a bunch of episodes. You can also access the audio version of all of our latest episodes. So if you prefer to listen to the show on YouTube, you can do that now. It is just youtube.com/privatepartsunknown. Again, youtube.com/privatepartsunknown. And make sure you hit the subscribe. It really helps us out in the algorithm. And check out my other podcast for more of my audio creations. I have The Bleeders about book writing and publishing, and Podcast Bestie, which is a best friend to podcasters trying to grow and monetize their shows. Shout out to Amy Rausch for the bomb-ass theme music. For more info about Amy and her music, check out amyrausch.com. That is Amy, RAASCH.com. This episode was mixed by my beloved audio guy, Michael Castaneda of Plastic Audio. And after enjoying this content, could we ask you for a quick favor? Just go to ratethispodcast.com/private and give us a 5-star rating and a review. So we have had some recent rating and review goals. We're trying to hit 285 on Apple Podcasts, and we hit it, baby. We are now up to 285, and you can help us reach our next goal of 290. So if you are listening on Apple Podcasts, just give us a 5-star rating and a review. Tell us what you love about the show. I will read any of those reviews with 5-star ratings on the podcast so you can get a shout out. And if you are listening on Spotify, we are now up to 142 ratings. Our next goal is 145, and you can help us get there by just going to the Private Parts Unknown page, going to the 3 dots on the right-hand side, and then clicking Rate Show, and then just give us 5 stars, and voila, you have just made my day. And you can actually help us out with these goals no matter where you are listening by just going to ratethispodcast.com/private and giving us a 5-star rating and a review. It helps other people find the show. It makes me feel amazing. It's a good thing, okay? And there is one more way you can support the show. We are now on the Fountain app. So if you are listening on Fountain or another V4V platform and you get value from this show, you can support us by sending a boostagram. You can even send a comment along with your boost. And I have to say, those are my favorite messages to get because they come with money. Thank you so much for sticking with me until the end. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring. Love you, privates.
With the Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
This is your captain speaking. We've got clear runway and the weather's fine, but we're just going to circle up here a while and get lucky. No, nothing like that. It's just these cash prizes add up quick. So I suggest you sit back, keep your tray table upright, and start getting lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.